My name is Adrian Cross, and I work for an obscure branch of the federal government that specializes in preventing bioterrorism threats. I've always been passionate about public safety, ensuring that no one, be it a brilliant criminal mastermind or an overzealous vigilante, endangers American communities. My everyday life, however, isn't nearly as dramatic as Hollywood blockbusters might depict. On most days, I'm busy writing technical reports, analyzing microbiological data, and liaising with local law enforcement. It's a surprisingly calm routine for someone who's assigned to the front lines of domestic security. That calmness, though, evaporated the day I moved to the quiet suburban cul-de-sac of Springdale Oaks, a place that sounded serene on paper, a warm slice of Americana that any person would love to call home. Large oak trees dotted the well-manicured lawns, and every house looked like it had been meticulously placed, almost as if it were part of some life-size dollhouse set. There was even a picturesque pond on the edge of the neighborhood, with a wooden gazebo for community gatherings. After years of renting in cramped city apartments, I thought I'd found my forever home. Little did I know that within a few weeks of settling in, I would encounter an individual whose paranoia, aggression, and unbridled sense of self-righteousness would turn that peaceful dream into a nightmarish lesson in how twisted things can get when someone wields a little too much local power. Her name was Barbara Armitage, but around the neighborhood, people called her Karen behind her back. She was a staunch member and self-appointed enforcer of the Homeowners Association, HOA. From the second I began unpacking boxes, she was there, standing on the sidewalk in front of my new house, arms folded over her chest, posture rigid, short blonde hair styled with the precision of a drill sergeant. She wore a pastel sweater, pressed khakis, and a scowl that made me feel like I'd broken some unwritten rule simply by existing. I remember stepping onto my porch, sweaty from hauling furniture, only to be greeted by that icy stare. "Hello," I called politely, offering my biggest, friendliest smile. Karen cleared her throat. "I notice you're moving in quite a bit of equipment. We've got strict rules about noise levels and unsightly storage. You do have an enclosed garage, don't you?" I was taken aback. "Yes, of course," I managed to say. "I'll be storing my boxes in the garage until I can unpack them." She gave a curt nod, as if to say, I expected as much. "We also have a strict policy on lawn maintenance, decorative flags, and any changes to exterior paint. This is a well-regulated community. We don't want any eyesores." My eyebrow twitched involuntarily. I hadn't even stepped inside my new home for a full hour, and I was already receiving a lecture. But I kept my composure. "Understood. I'll be sure to read the HOA guidelines thoroughly." Karen didn't smile back. She just nodded again, turned on her heel, and marched off. It was a strange welcome, but I brushed it off. After all, how bad could an HOA really be? Despite the cold welcome, the neighborhood had plenty of redeeming qualities. The families next door were warm and generous. They invited me to barbecues, potlucks, and introduced me to their kids. On my second weekend, I found myself at a small gathering in the local park, learning everyone's names and backstories. Springdale Oaks was diverse in age, with retirees, young professionals, and families with children. Karen was there, too, but she mostly observed from a distance. She seemed to enjoy telling everyone how to arrange their potluck tables, where to hang balloons, in which direction to face the grills so that the smoke wouldn't disturb the precious community aesthetic. In short, she was a micromanager, meddling in the smallest details. But everyone tolerated her. She had an uncanny way of pressuring people into compliance, brandishing the HOA rulebook as if it were a holy text. Over the next few weeks, I noticed how she would creep around in the late evenings, peeking over fences, checking to see if anyone's trash bins had been left out a moment too long. Neighbors whispered about her obsessive policing, but they were too wary or tired to fight back. She was known to issue violation after violation, using technicalities to impose fines. Some folks tried appealing them, but Karen seldom budged. She claimed the rules were there for everyone's benefit, never mind that she was their sole arbiter. At first, I tried to keep a low profile. I kept my lawn perfectly trimmed, my trash bins hidden behind the garage, and my front porch devoid of anything that might draw the HOA's ire. But Karen found something to criticize anyway. One afternoon, I received a formal notice taped to my door. My mailbox was supposedly 1.3 inches too close to the curb. Another day, she knocked on my door at 7 a.m. to lecture me about a potted plant she deemed inconsistent with the neighborhood color palette. The strangest part? She always seemed to derive some twisted sense of pleasure from these encounters. She wore a smug grin each time she caught me in a supposed infraction. She'd stand there, notepad in hand, and scribble as if she were building a dossier. Not that I was frightened. I just found the extent of her dedication bizarre, even pathological. Still, I had no reason to suspect what was coming. Indeed, for a while, I chalked it all up to typical suburban drama, the kind of petty squabbles that form the basis of half the neighborhood gossip in America. My background in federal service rarely intersected with daily life, so I went about my business quietly, never broadcasting my profession to the neighbors. After all, mentioning Federal Bioterrorism Specialist can really put a damper on casual conversation at a barbecue. As the weeks went by, Karen's aggression seemed to intensify. I began hearing rumors about some new initiative she was pushing. She wanted the HOA to have more direct control over each household's utilities, specifically water usage and sanitation. The rationale, she claimed, was efficiency and standards. She insisted that consolidated management would keep water bills low and neighborhoods pristine. But many of the residents were concerned. What did a middle-aged HOA zealot know about controlling a small utility system? Could the association's meager funds even handle such a project? Yet Karen plowed ahead, distributing pamphlets around the neighborhood that depicted a bright future of uniform front lawns, shining driveways, and perfect landscaping. Anyone who questioned the feasibility of the project was dismissed as lacking community spirit or branded a troublemaker. At one point, an elderly neighbor, Mr. Jefferson, tried to reason with her. "Karen, we already pay for public water services. How can we possibly save money by adding more bureaucracy?" She shot him a withering glare. "Mr. Jefferson, if you read the pamphlet, you'd see that I've worked out the numbers. We'll all come out ahead in the long run, and we'll have more control over how our neighborhood looks." Mr. Jefferson and a few others rolled their eyes but didn't push it. Karen was known for retaliating with fines, citations, and verbal harassment at HOA meetings. So the project remained on the table. One evening, at a monthly HOA meeting, she brought up the idea of installing a communal water pump that would feed into our houses. The county water supply would still be there, but she envisioned a parallel system that the HOA could regulate more directly. She even used the word enforce, which was odd. She claimed it would help the association crack down on overwatered lawns and unapproved pools. Something about this made my professional instincts tingle. In my line of work, I'm used to investigating suspicious proposals or unusual manipulations of public resources, especially water supplies. Still, I never imagined Karen might attempt something truly dangerous. At worst, I expected the typical petty tyranny, maybe shutting off someone's water if they were late on dues. But Karen had something far more sinister in mind. The first sign that something was truly amiss came one Saturday morning. I was out for a jog, weaving through the neighborhood sidewalks, when I noticed Karen skulking around the community's main water maintenance shack, a modest building at the edge of the development that connected to the broader municipal water lines. It was normally locked, and only county workers were supposed to have access. But there she was, fidgeting with the padlock as if she had a key or was trying to get in. I slowed my pace, watching from a distance. Karen glanced over her shoulder. Upon seeing me, she hurried away, moving so quickly that she almost tripped on a loose stone. I thought about confronting her, but decided it might be best to gather more information first. Sometimes spooking a suspect can make them more cautious, which in turn makes them harder to catch doing anything overtly illegal. Later that day, I returned to the maintenance shack, making sure no one saw me. I tested the lock. It was slightly loose, as if someone had tampered with it. Nothing else seemed unusual, but my gut feeling wouldn't let it go. Why was she messing around near the water lines? That evening, I made discreet inquiries with a few trusted neighbors. They told me Karen had been unusually secretive lately, but they hadn't pegged her for anything beyond her typical meddling. A few chuckled nervously, saying, "At least you're not on her bad side." Little did they know that Karen's bad side was far more terrifying than a series of petty HOA violations. A couple of weeks passed, and the tension around the proposed water project grew. Karen called a special HOA meeting. She insisted that mandatory inspections of all residents' water usage equipment, like sprinklers and hoses, be conducted, presumably to gather data for her parallel water system idea. Effective next month, she announced, arms folded, chin raised, we will require every household to submit to a thorough yard and external utility inspection. This is for the greater good of Springdale Oaks and for the environment. During the meeting, I asked calmly, who will be doing these inspections, Karen? Normally such tasks fall under county inspectors or professional plumbers. Does the HOA plan on hiring specialists? She shot me a thin-lipped smile. We haven't finalized the details yet, but I'm perfectly capable of doing a preliminary assessment. I have experience. Experience in what, exactly? I wondered. Karen hadn't shown any legitimate certifications or training. Even if she had some personal background in construction or utility management, the scale of her project seemed suspect. I raised another question. Has the county water department been informed? She wrinkled her nose. I see no reason to involve them any further. This is a private community matter. Besides, they hardly pay attention to the unique needs of our neighborhood. A hush fell over the group. It was well known that Karen often clashed with county officials over property codes. But to circumvent them entirely for something so fundamental as water management? It sounded reckless. I stole a glance around the room and saw the uneasy looks on my neighbors' faces. But no one voiced outright opposition. Karen's intimidation tactics kept most of them silent. If you dared to stand up to her, you could expect a wave of fines, official letters, and humiliation at the next HOA meeting. Still, I wasn't just another quiet neighbor. I worked for the federal government in a capacity that gives me an advantage in spotting potential threats, especially those involving public health or tampering with utilities. There was a methodical side of me that wanted to gather more information before taking action. Because if Karen was doing something truly nefarious, I needed evidence to stop her and to justify any investigative steps I might take. A day after the meeting, an envelope arrived in my mailbox, devoid of any return address. Inside was a single typed note. She's planning something bigger than you think. Watch the water supply. No signature, no hints as to who had sent it. My mind immediately buzzed with questions. Did one of the neighbors sense something was off? Was someone on the HOA board having second thoughts? Regardless, this was a direct warning, and it matched my suspicions. That evening, I decided to do some quiet surveillance. I set up a small camera on the second floor of my house, pointed at the street where the maintenance shack was located. It wouldn't show me everything, but if Karen tried another late-night visit, I'd know. Sure enough, around midnight, I caught a glimpse of her car headlights moving slowly down the street. She parked near the shack, then walked toward the structure, once again fiddling with the lock. This time, she managed to open it and slip inside. A couple of minutes later, she emerged with something in her arms, looked like a small cooler or container. Her body language was furtive, head darting from side to side like a fox checking for predators. My heart pounded as I watched. What on earth is she doing? The next morning, as dawn broke, I quietly visited the shack again. The lock had indeed been tampered with. On the ground, I noticed faint footprints in the dirt, perhaps from her shoes. I also found a small piece of cloth snagged on a corner of the door, maybe from her sweater. No definitive proof of wrongdoing yet, but she clearly had some clandestine agenda involving the water lines. I felt a surge of protective instinct. The neighbors had no idea how vulnerable they were, especially if Karen was tampering with the water supply. If she introduced contaminants, whether accidentally or deliberately, this could escalate into a public health crisis. That night, instead of just letting my camera do the work, I parked my car inconspicuously around the corner. Using my training, I planned to observe her more closely. If she did anything suspicious, I'd gather first-hand evidence. Weeks of careful observation followed. Occasionally, Karen would drive to the maintenance shack. She would always bring a small container or bag, stay inside for a few minutes, then leave. I couldn't risk barging in right away because I needed solid proof of wrongdoing. My job had taught me that hunches, while valuable, need to be backed by real evidence, especially if we're talking about a potential bioterrorism angle. I started doing some research on Karen herself, a background check through public records. It turned out she'd once been involved in a lawsuit regarding a contaminated community pool in another neighborhood. She had served as the HOA president there, as well. The case never made it to trial, and the details were sparse, but alarm bells rang in my mind. It seemed more than coincidental that she was at the center of another water-related controversy. Around this time, I also noticed an unusual pattern in the neighborhood. Several residents began complaining about minor illnesses, nothing dramatic, mostly mild gastrointestinal issues, headaches, and a sense of general fatigue. People blamed it on flu season, or maybe on something they'd eaten, but I suspected another cause. If Karen was tampering with the water lines, she might have been testing small doses of contaminants. One evening, my neighbor Linda, a friendly nurse, mentioned the uptick in ailments to me. I don't recall so many people complaining of stomach issues last year, she said, sipping tea on my porch. They seem to come in clusters, too. Like 4 or 5 neighbors, all on the same block. I feigned casual interest. Could be a virus. Or maybe something in the food at the last community barbecue. Linda shrugged. Could be. But I have this strange feeling. I can't put my finger on it. That conversation solidified my resolve. I needed to take a water sample. In the dead of night, I slipped to the side of my house and carefully collected water from the external spigot. I packaged it for analysis, using a basic field testing kit I kept from my professional supply. Then I sent it to a more advanced federal lab for a thorough screen, using the quiet channels available to me. I had to wait several days for the results, but when they finally came in, they confirmed my worst fears. The water contained traces of a harmful bacterium, something not typically found in municipal supplies. The strains were mild enough not to cause widespread fatalities, but they were definitely not a natural occurrence in treated drinking water. If the dosage increased, or if a more virulent strain were introduced, we could be dealing with a serious public health crisis. Now I had at least some evidence that Karen was tampering with the water lines. The next question was, how do I confront this? As a federal agent specializing in bioterrorism, I had the authority to escalate matters to my superiors. But going through official channels meant a full-scale investigation that could alert Karen prematurely. She might hide her evidence, cover her tracks, or even accelerate her plans in desperation. My top priority was the safety of the neighborhood, so I resolved to gather a bit more information to ensure a watertight case. I also wondered about her motive. Was this all about punishing neighbors she believed were violating HOA rules? Or was it a twisted power trip, a chance to hold everyone hostage by controlling something as vital as water? Karen seemed the type to enjoy watching people grovel for her approval. The sickness around the neighborhood could be a taste of the chaos she wanted to unleash if she didn't get her way. I laid out a plan. Document every instance of her entering the water shack with timestamps and, if possible, photos or video evidence. Collect multiple water samples from different homes to show a pattern of contamination that only an insider could cause. Coordinate with local law enforcement discreetly once I had enough proof. Given my job, I also had the option of involving specialized federal teams. But first, I needed local cooperation. During the next HOA meeting, Karen unveiled her grand plan. A brand new, HOA-controlled water system complete with a local treatment facility that would feed into every house. She framed it as the ultimate triumph of community self-reliance. Some neighbors were skeptical. Mr. Jefferson raised his hand. How will this be funded? He asked. It sounds expensive. Karen waved off his concern. We'll reallocate existing HOA funds, and I have a private investor lined up who believes in our vision. Private investor? Someone else muttered. Who? She refused to disclose the name. That's confidential. But rest assured, the finances are robust. We'll finalize the details soon. As I watched her speak, I couldn't shake the feeling of stepping into a surreal world. A homeowners association, led by a tyrant with illusions of grandeur, was attempting to build a miniature municipal water system, while apparently testing harmful bacteria on unsuspecting neighbors. It was madness, but I also understood how she kept people in line. She was confident, forceful, and skillful in deflecting opposition. After the meeting, I lingered in the community center hallway. Karen approached me with a cold smile. Adrian, I've noticed you've been awfully quiet about the new water plan. Don't you have something to say? I met her gaze calmly. I prefer to see all the facts and figures first. Her smile tightened. You strike me as someone who might cause trouble if you disagree with the plan. That wouldn't be good for neighborhood harmony. I raised an eyebrow. I have no intention of causing trouble if everything is above board. Karen's eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I thought I saw real malice behind them. Just remember, she said, the HOA has rules. When people break them, there are consequences. I nodded slowly. I understand consequences better than you might think. We locked eyes in a silent standoff. Then she walked away, leaving me with the distinct impression that this was more than just a personal vendetta. She was plotting something big, and I was the only obstacle she truly feared. Over the next week, I collected more samples from other residents who complained of odd-tasting water or mild symptoms. Each time, the same bacterial markers appeared. The contamination was deliberate, but still relatively low level. It seemed Karen was refining her methods, possibly testing how the bacteria spread or how quickly people got sick. I also captured more surveillance footage of her visits to the water shack, often late at night or in the early morning hours. She always carried similar containers, some small canisters, sometimes large jugs. She was definitely adding something to the water lines. Finally, I decided it was time to loop in a trusted contact from my federal team, Agent Renfield, a specialist in domestic terrorism. I arranged a meeting at a downtown cafe, away from Springdale Oaks. Over steaming cups of coffee, I laid out my evidence, lab results, timestamps, photos. Renfield's normally calm demeanor vanished as he flipped through the documents, eyes widening. "We might be looking at a domestic bioterror incident," he said. "A small-scale one, sure, but this is serious. We'll need to alert the local authorities and coordinate a takedown. But we need to be sure we can catch her in the act." I nodded. "She's cunning. If we make one wrong move, she might escalate. We could see a full-blown outbreak." Renfield sighed. "We'll do this by the book. I'll deploy a discreet team to monitor the site. Once we confirm she's tampering with the water supply, we move in." I left the cafe feeling both relieved and anxious. A part of me wanted to storm into Karen's house and stop her immediately, but I knew that impulsive action could jeopardize the entire operation. We decided on a plan. Federal agents would stake out the water maintenance shack on the nights Karen had been most active, weekends, typically around midnight to 2 a.m. They'd conceal themselves in unmarked vehicles, equipped with night vision and cameras. The moment Karen showed up to tamper with the system, they'd have probable cause to move in. Meanwhile, I continued to act as though nothing was amiss. I mowed my lawn, waved at neighbors, and even attended a small block party. Karen was there, issuing passive-aggressive compliments and lecturing people about property lines. She hardly looked like someone capable of a bioterror plot, but that was the insidious part. On the chosen night, I waited at home, my phone close by. Renfield's team was in place. The minutes felt like hours as I stared at the silent screen. Around 12:45 a.m., my phone finally buzzed. A text from Renfield. "She's here. Container in hand." My heart pounded. The plan was for them to apprehend her once she began tampering with the water lines. In the best-case scenario, they'd catch her red-handed with the bacterial agent. Then another message. "She's injecting something. We're going in." That was my cue to head outside, too, in case they needed additional backup or a sworn statement. My mind raced with what might be happening just a few blocks away. I arrived in time to see the flash of red and blue lights illuminating the street. A cluster of unmarked SUVs and local police cruisers surrounded the maintenance shack. A handful of heavily armed agents stood guard. Karen was in handcuffs, pressed up against the hood of a vehicle, screaming at the top of her lungs. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I'm on the HOA board. I have rights. This is my neighborhood. I make the rules here." Agent Renfield calmly recited her Miranda rights while other agents secured the containers. From a distance, I saw the looks of shock and terror on the faces of residents who had gathered. Lights flicked on in houses up and down the street. People peered out of windows or stepped onto their porches, trying to figure out what was going on. Karen thrashed and kicked, trying to resist the agents. "You're all going to regret this. I was trying to help this community. You're the criminals. This is trespassing. My property." One of the agents held up a sealed evidence bag containing a vial. Inside was a cloudy liquid. "We found multiple canisters inside the shack," he said to Renfield. "Looks like a bacterial culture. We'll need the lab to identify it precisely, but it seems consistent with what we've been seeing." Renfield nodded, then turned to me. "It's over," he said quietly. I exhaled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. But I also knew this was just the beginning of a lengthy legal process. Karen would face federal charges for tampering with a public water supply, likely multiple counts that fell under terrorism statutes, given that a harmful agent was involved. As they hauled her off, she caught sight of me. Her eyes burned with hatred. "You set me up," she spat, voice trembling. "You've ruined everything." I stared back. "You ruined it yourself, Karen." In the days that followed, Springdale Oaks was a swirl of chaos. The local news stations caught wind of the incident, and soon the story of an HOA tyrant gone rogue splashed across headlines. Interviews with neighbors revealed a mix of shock and relief. Some had suspected Karen was a bully, but no one had imagined she'd go as far as attempting to poison the community. The county health department conducted a thorough decontamination of the water lines to ensure no lingering bacteria remained. Any households that tested positive for contamination received specialized cleaning of their pipes. While the health impact had been relatively minor, only mild illnesses, The potential for something far worse rattled everyone. Meanwhile, Karen sat in federal custody, indicted on multiple charges, including domestic terrorism, reckless endangerment, and violation of state and federal water tampering laws. The bail hearing didn't go in her favor. The judge deemed her a flight risk and a danger to the community. She was denied bail. The HOA board, scrambling to distance themselves from her, promptly revoked her membership and seized any authority she once had. But more revelations came to light. She'd used HOA funds for clandestine purchases of lab equipment and chemicals. Once the auditors got involved, they discovered she'd racked up huge debts in the HOA's name, presumably to finance her twisted water project. Though the legal saga would take time, the public humiliation was immediate. Karen had been one of those people who thrived on appearing in control, on lording over her neighbors. Now, she was plastered on the news as the cautionary tale of suburban mania turned criminal. Springdale Oaks gradually regained a sense of calm. People began greeting each other with relief, no longer worried about petty violations or unwarranted fines. The new interim HOA board promised more transparency and a friendlier approach. They sent out a heartfelt apology to all residents and vowed to reevaluate every rule Karen had obsessively enforced. One crisp morning, a neighbor who had once been too afraid to speak against Karen knocked on my door. It was Linda, the nurse who had first mentioned the odd illnesses. She brought a homemade pie. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, a bit sheepishly. "We all sort of suspected something was off, but none of us had the courage or the know-how to handle it. You put yourself on the line for us." I smiled, accepting the pie. "I'm just glad everyone's safe." I still hadn't broadcasted the full extent of my federal role to the neighborhood, but Linda probably guessed that I was more than an average Joe. People had seen me on the scene with the agents. Whispers circulated. Still, most were just grateful, and that was enough. Months passed. Karen's trial became a local media spectacle. Prosecutors presented damning evidence. Photos of her tampering with the water lines, forensic analysis of the bacterial cultures, and financial records showing her misuse of HOA funds. I testified in court, detailing how I discovered the contamination and how I alerted federal authorities. Karen's defense attorney tried to argue that she was merely experimenting with a non-lethal substance, that she had no intention of harming anyone. But the evidence of systematically introducing bacteria into the water supply told a different story. The prosecution emphasized that even if no one died, her reckless actions constituted a grave threat to public safety. It didn't help that Karen's outbursts continued in the courtroom. She berated witnesses, argued with the judge, and interrupted the proceedings to claim she was the real victim. Her arrogance and refusal to show remorse only bolstered the prosecution's case. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on multiple felony counts. The judge handed down a severe sentence, citing the seriousness of her actions. Karen would spend a significant chunk of her life in federal prison. Additionally, her property, once her symbol of status and power, was subject to forfeiture. The government seized it to help cover the extensive legal fees, restitution to the HOA, and the costs of medical bills for neighbors who had fallen ill. Watching her reaction to the verdict was a surreal moment. The smugness drained from her face, replaced by shock and rage. She screamed at the judge, "This isn't fair. I'm not a criminal. I was doing what was best for my neighborhood." Then she was led away, handcuffed, leaving behind whatever shred of dignity she might have once possessed. After the trial, life in Springdale Oaks slowly returned to what I'd originally hoped it would be, a peaceful haven. The community replaced Karen's rules with more reasonable guidelines. Neighbors bonded over the shared ordeal, forging stronger ties than ever before. The new HOA leadership was cautious, transparent, and always open to input from residents. I stood by my living room window one sunny afternoon, gazing at the tree-lined street. Kids rode their bikes, and families chatted on porches. The entire atmosphere felt lighter. It was as if a dense storm cloud had dissipated, allowing sunlight to flood in. I reflected on Karen's downfall. In my profession, I've seen all manner of criminals, some motivated by money, others by ideology. Karen's motivation was more insidious, a toxic blend of ego, a lust for control, and a twisted sense of righteousness. She believed she had the moral high ground, that punishing or controlling her neighbors was justified because she was protecting the community. But in the end, she overlooked a crucial detail, that beneath my unassuming exterior, I was trained to detect and thwart bioterror threats. She had no idea I was equipped with the tools to see through her schemes. She assumed that her intimidation tactics would keep everyone silent, that no one could challenge her. She was wrong. When I think about the finality of her punishment, a lengthy prison sentence, the confiscation of her house, the scorn of public opinion, I feel a mix of relief and sadness. No one wakes up one day and decides to poison an entire neighborhood. Karen's path likely involved years of resentment, a desire for absolute control, and a moral blindness that allowed her to rationalize her actions. Ultimately, she became an example of how petty authority can spiral into real danger if left unchecked. In the end, Springdale Oaks survived Karen's reign of terror. The water is safe again, and the community is tighter knit than ever. Whenever a neighbor complains about a minor issue, a fence that's an inch too high, or a car parked slightly off-center, we all share a knowing smile. We have learned that compassion and open communication matter far more than rigid rules or petty power trips. I still serve in my federal role, ever vigilant for new threats, but I carry a renewed sense of purpose. This case reminded me that danger can emerge in the most unexpected places, sometimes wearing the face of a neighbor who claims to have everyone's best interests at heart. And for Karen, locked away in a secure facility, there are no more committees to chair, no more petty fines to levy, and no more illusions that she rules the block. The quiet suburban streets of Springdale Oaks have reclaimed their peace, free from the tyrant once known as Karen. Perhaps the ultimate lesson is this: true community isn't built on fear or strict enforcement of arbitrary rules. It thrives on trust, respect, and mutual care. And when someone like Karen tries to break that trust for personal gain or twisted ambition, there are those who stand ready to protect what matters most, even if it means uncovering a dangerous secret buried right under our well-manicured lawns. With Karen's downfall, life in Springdale Oaks has moved on, wiser, stronger, and no longer afraid of the self-appointed enforcer who once treated us all like subjects in her personal kingdom. The final chapter in her story is one of confinement and confiscation, a cautionary tale reminding us that no one, not even the self-proclaimed queen of an HOA, is above the law.